All right, welcome to the Easton Economic Development Council meeting, March 10th, 2022. For a matter of quorum, I'll just go around the room, and if you could say here, that would be fantastic. Stephanie.
Here.
Greg.
Here.
Dan.
Here.
Dottie.
Here.
Jonathan.
Here.
And John.
Here.
All right. So let's get right down to business. Let's get right into the agenda. We try to keep these about an hour. So the first item on the agenda is the Think Easton EDC website update. Now, I don't believe Matt is present, and that is his wheelhouse. I know he has been working on it a good amount too, but I cannot update it on my own. So we'll go right to the next agenda item, which is doing the business in Easton reference guide, Stephanie Danielson. If you guys recall, in our last meeting, we had a discussion about a discussion that occurred in the Easton outside meeting. And in that discussion with Karen, with Isabel, Stephanie and I were talking with them, and they were sharing some frustrations about doing business in Easton. And I could see both sides of it, see how there was difficulty. Neil of McGuire's had shared with us also in that same meeting that he has spoken to a number of people who have gone to start businesses in Easton but didn't check off all the boxes. And when they would go to him and ask him, what to do, what the next steps were, he would go through the whole list, and they hadn't checked off all the boxes, so they were having difficulty. And it was kind of discovered that, it's no wonder you're having difficulty because you're not going through the steps right, which then revealed light on that we need to update our doing business in Easton reference guide. So Stephanie, I know I think you had emailed that to Neil so we could have an outside perspective of, does this make sense? Because to somebody like you or us, where we're looking at this stuff all day, we kind of go through it pretty quickly and it makes sense very quickly. But to other people, it might be more dense material. So maybe you could fill us in on how that's going, Stephanie?
Right. So Tish and I have been working on a draft, and I actually had Tish put together a draft of what it might look like. I think at this point, there are probably a few too many steps. It looks great if it were a PowerPoint presentation. But again, for someone who's coming in, who, like a small business, may have no idea what might be necessary to get a business started in town, meaning they might not know that there are sign bylaws that they need to comply with, and they need a building permit for signs. They might not know that fitting out a building needs a building permit if they're moving into, say, an already existing facility. They certainly are not likely to know that there might be Conservation Commission issues. There might be wetlands if they're building a new structure. So what I want is really to kind of have a single page that says, here are the things you need to consider when you're opening a business in Easton, and locate it in a place that would be easy for people to get to. So Tish and I are going to work a little bit more on that, and then I haven't sent it yet to Neil. I will send it to Neil, but I'd also like to send it to everyone here, because even though, I really do this every day, so I really know where people need to be directed to. But from the perspective of people who are lay people or are in the business and kind of understand this, getting that perspective will really be helpful to make sure we get pretty darn close to right out of the gates. I mean, I think that's one thing. People design websites, and it's not until people actually start using it and provide you feedback that you learn whether it's working or not, or you're looking at your statistics.
I have a quick question, Stephanie. So this doing business in Easton reference guide, this is a pre-existing document that just needs an update. Or is that's correct? No?
No. We had a couple of things, and while I was gone, they got lost. Tish had actually put together a probably 3 years ago, a single page that was actually very useful in that it indicated if you're looking, if you need a business certificate, you contact the clerk's office. If you're looking for building, it was really a pretty straightforward guide. And I don't know why, but somehow it was deactivated and we can't locate where it was. So we're starting from scratch. And then we had a very dense online guidebook. I think it was probably a PDF with links that had flowcharts, but I think the flowcharts probably were a little overwhelming for some people. And a lot of those links with the new system, that was developed under the old version of the town's website. And you'll recall that just a few years ago, the website was updated and a lot of those links broke during that.
Okay. Well, my follow-up question, which actually still applies, so whatever you did have before, how was it accessed? Where was it accessible? Because in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, so this doing business in Easton Reference Guide is something that's desperately needed, but its accessibility is also just as important as its creation. Where will people access it? How did they before? Does the chamber have a copy? You know.
Yeah, so both of these were tools that were available through the town website. My recollection, the flow chart was accessible under the business tab on the homepage. And that single page guide directing you to the different departments kind of immediately with the critical information of who headed up the department, a link to the department's webpage, all that. That was on the Economic Development Council page.
Okay. So in addition to its creation, we need to figure out how to get this out there very accessible and into the hands of as many people as possible. So anybody have any comments about that? Nothing? Okay. All right. Next item is accept the meeting minutes of February 10th. Did everyone have a chance to take a look at those? And would anyone like to make a motion? Not everybody at once, though.
I'll make a motion
All
to accept the
right.
minutes.
All right, Fulginity and Smith second. We'll do roll call. Stephanie?
Aye.
Greg? Dan?
Yes.
Dottie?
Yes.
Jonathan?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
And yes. Okay. Meeting minutes approved. Discover Easton. This was a great conversation that we were having in our last meeting. Easton as a tourist destination. We discussed, it was the opening. It was the first time we had ever just, had this conversation. Nobody had, at least I hadn't been thinking in the vein as this is a possibility. When you live here for a very long time, you really don't see things in that light. But the second somebody just pulls the curtain back, and you're like, oh, wow, that is actually an incredible opportunity. So we decided in that meeting that we were going to talk about in this meeting marketing plan, actionable items, and grant opportunities. Dottie, you weren't here for the last meeting. I think I'd like to hear what you think, as well as any possible grant opportunities you might know of, because you're like the wizard of grants.
I've been called worse. So Stephanie and I have been talking about this a little bit. It's really important. Tourism is really being focused on with a lot of grant opportunities from the federal government and the state government. And, we might think, not think of Easton as a tourist destination, but if you talked to what's his name, who heads up the Historical Society, Frank Menino, he'll tell you there's like hundreds of thousands of people a year. Like there's a lot of people that come through here to look at our historic buildings. And then we have the captive audience of Stonehill, right? So when we have families coming here to look at the college, we should be telling them, while you're here, check out these great things. there's also ecotourism. And so that's our trails and our bike paths and our natural resources that we just take for granted, borderland and all of the great outdoor resources that we have. But that's all part of eco and cultural tourism as well. And then we're one of very few communities that has an established cultural district. And so when we pull all those pieces together, there's a really good opportunity here for tourism. And there was a federal grant that came out. We wouldn't have really qualified for it. So, but there are state grants that come out in pieces and parts. There's also grants that come out from Mass Cultural Council. We can be looking at a lot of those different things if we have specific asks. The trustees of reservations was just out here Saturday looking at the Governor Ames estate. They want to make some changes. They're going to take down the white residence building, the home that's there, and they're going to put up a 3-season like a portico kind of a thing. It'll have it's going to be a tent. It'll have a top and sides, but it will come down in the winter, the tent part. They're envisioning hiring a person to help work with the town on events and tourist kinds of opportunities. And when we think of tourism isn't not necessarily like people coming from out of state. There's like local tourism, right, from our neighbors. So, and if we can connect that with other resources in the region. So Plymouth, for instance, has a really great tourism mechanism, both locally, nationally, internationally. We could connect to that. So if somebody's coming to Plymouth for the day, maybe they want to take a ride to Easton 40 minutes away and take a look at some of our assets. So by partnering with other regional tourist destinations, it could be really helpful to Easton.
What does everybody think?
Well, coming from an architectural background, I can remember when I was a student at Syracuse when we came out to Easton, all the way from New York. Easton has the largest collection of Richardson buildings in the world. We have one of his 3 wood-framed houses that are still in existence. We have the most used state park in the Commonwealth. We have a college, and we were so close right before COVID to getting that hotel that we so desperately need, which would really help with all of this. And for years, I remember when I first got involved in this out here, Ed Hands and John Gray kind of talked about architectural tours, and I thought, oh, that's really specialized. But given our limited, we don't have a highway, our limited business areas, we do need to be creative. And given the appreciation of these next generations for beauty and for architecture and for art, absolutely, there's an opportunity to take advantage of those and even dovetail it with some of our newer successful businesses. Can't you just see the Shoveltown Music Festival happening on the Ames estate? And so there's I think it's definitely an untapped resource, and hopefully we can figure out a way to take advantage of that, especially given how much we've had to invest in these buildings to maintain them, right? They are expensive, but they're certainly worth it. So.
Yeah.
Could I circle back for a minute and just ask? I hadn't heard anything about the hotel that were that close. How far did that get, and where was that looking to go?
It was going to be part of the Queesit overlay. It was going to be behind Stone Forge, and it's the only reason it fell apart on a corporate level because the brand that it was going to be was going to also put one. They decided to put one in either Foxborough or Mansfield, so it kind of violated their radius, and they wanted to go with a lesser brand, and the developer didn't want that. He wanted a higher brand, and said, circle back, give me 6 months, we'll figure this out. But then COVID hit, and so, but clearly, I mean, we all know the untapped resource that Stonehill is, and how beneficial it would be for us to get a hotel in that area.
Anybody else? Tourism? So I couldn't, Greg, everything you said, I couldn't be in more agreement with. I think the idea of a hotel has never been off the table for us. And as time goes by, as we progress, as all the, as these sewer districts come online, as the idea of tourism, comes into our sphere, we need it now more than ever. So I don't, the effort in that, I don't think is ever letting up until we see it, whenever that may occur. But so we're talking about Easton as a tourist destination. Our next steps, let's talk about what our next step is. We can't make it so massive that it's unattainable, but so what do we do? Do we explore where we would centralize a tourist location? Because you can't just say Easton's a tourist destination, come to Easton. Once people come to Easton, you need to kind of point them in a direction. And I think, at least in my mind, of course we have Borderland, we have Stonehill, but to Greg's point, where could you go and actually get out of your car and stay out of your car for hours and see a ton of stuff? In my mind, I think the only location for that is actually downtown, with all the buildings, with the history. There's a couple restaurants, and hopefully some development down the line. There's some property that's undeveloped. Hopefully that will be coming up. But there's so much downtown. So in my mind, I say, well, let's start with picking one area as a tourist destination, and grow from there. What do you guys think about that? Good idea, bad idea? What are you thinking?
So, Mark, I do agree with you. Isn't that the essence of Easton as well? It started with shovel shop, a la Ames, and that's what everybody's. At least I'm not from Easton, so that was one of the items that was brought to my attention. And then, and the impact it had on World War I, World War II with the shovels, right? So there's significance not only to Easton, but there's significance to, the nation as a whole. So I think you're spot on. I think the town of Easton, you can get out and walk. It's close approximation to the park. Like, you didn't mention it, but it's there. You have the farm right up the street. You have Hilliard's, which is like Willy Wonka and the chocolate factory when you walk inside. So I just think you hit it spot on.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just thinking about what you said, Mark, right? Which, like, the parking lot behind the center of town, I'm just trying to think, like, logistically, right? You've got, is that
owned by the trustees reservation? That park, that will be part of it. The old train station, which is the history.
Right, so you've got that park, you've got the train station, you've got the buildings. To me, yeah, from a walkability, like, I live very close to that area of Easton, right? I walk that area all the time, and I just keep thinking in my head as we're talking about this, like, what would the walking path be around that area? Because, and it loops you back up to the center of town, and there is some restaurants and a shop or two. For the town of Easton, it makes the most sense, this area, honestly.
What about you, Dan?
No, I think it's a great idea. I think Easton, especially the downtown of Borderland, are historic or a travel destination, regardless of what we're doing or not doing. But even that said, I think it's a really unique opportunity to be strategic about what we're going to highlight. And I think Greg hit the nail on the head, the architectural piece, and what that could mean in terms of collaboration. Like Dottie said, maybe not necessarily with another community. Like if you're going to Plymouth, you're looking at the oldest town in the country. You're going to Plymouth Rock. You're going to Plymouth Plantation, and those attributes that are very specific to Plymouth. And I think that drives a lot of specific people that are looking for that context. I think from an architectural standpoint, partnering with maybe universities or organizations that are focused just on that, and seeing how we can cultivate relationships with those organizations, whoever they may be, to kind of attract them to make us that destination for that particular audience, and then try to expand upon it and build it up from there. So I think it could be a pretty daunting task if we try to cast too wide of a net, but if we're very strategic and specific about who the outreach is to and what the audience is that we're trying to highlight, that's special to them, I think other things will come out of that, because families are already coming to go to the children's museum. Our architectural folks are still coming to town, just to Greg's point, to see what you know, the Rich's Homestead design. But you know, if we can kind of align that message to a specific audience, I think it could be fantastic.
So part of the thing that we talk about a lot is we don't like to do reports to be able to lay the framework for organizing this kind of information and the strategy of how we want to move forward, and that helps us get grant funding. So the regional planning agency that I work for, Old Colony Planning Council, is going to be is in the process of applying for a federal grant for the next 2-year economic recovery piece. And so they are looking at putting in a part for travel and tourism for the region. So for the 17 communities they represent, part of that would consist of doing asset mapping, which would really be kind of the first step when you're looking at this. You know, I'm looking at it by the region, but by community for Easton, we'd be looking at identifying all these assets, classifying those, thinking about things like a tourist visitor center. Where would people stop to get the information? Where would they get the maps? This would bring in the self-guided walking tour app that you could, you know, walk around. That's been in development for a few years now, where you could go to some of these places and tap the button and read or listen to the historical story about that. But it has to start with some type of a plan. So I think, you know, working with the regional planning agency is a good start, especially if there's not going to be a cost to the town for that. If that doesn't come through, we should probably look at commissioning some kind of a study to do that.
I very much agree with you, Dottie. You know, some of the things that I think of when, as this conversation is unfolding, I'm not going off topic. I'll bring it back to the center, to where we're talking about. But have any of you ever been to Newport and toured a mansion recently? And you know, when I did it years ago, there was a guide. There was somebody there to take you through, and they spoke. But now when you do it, you go and you pick up a headset, and it's a complete. You're in a building, whether it's a Breakers or some other mansion, and you're in there with the dozens of people. And it's complete and total silence because everybody has a headset. And as you enter into a room, it'll tell you a story of an event that happened in the room. And it is absolutely incredibly captivating. I have 2 little kids, and we brought them, and you know, at the time my daughter was like 7. She couldn't get enough. She was in complete silence for hours on end, and just listening and visualizing the stories and tales of what actually occurred. It was incredible. And I thought, you know, I tabled the thought, and then the tourism idea came up, and I said, well, you know, and we had this conversation, Stephanie and I, in a Discover Easton meeting. What about a walking tour? Downtown walking tour, audio guided walking tour, where, you know, you go to a location, say, just visualize you're in front of Oaks Ames Memorial Hall in the library, and there's like a little, I say kiosk, it's probably not the right word, but something with a QR code. You scan your phone, and you hear a whole story of what this is, where you are, and then as you continue down. But also you could do it in such a way that like the Freedom Trail. There could be a line where you follow the line around downtown, and there's stops. I love that idea, and I actually reached out to a gentleman who, this is what he does. His company across the country does this, and he provided pricing for a walking tour. And what it would include would be exactly that. It would have music, sound effects, you know, tell a story, different voices if there was dialogue in it. And it would be, I think that would be a great step. It was more expensive than I thought, but then as I thought of what it could draw in, I thought it's not that expensive. So that's, you know, what I would like to come out of this meeting is an actionable item for us. So we've discussed, and we think that's a good area. So what's the responsibility of us between now and our next meeting? What are we thinking about? What are we going to do? You know, let's please contribute. Let me know what you guys are thinking.
If I may, I'm a believer sometimes of just kind of jumping into the deep end, and not that this is all that deep, but we already have we already know what we have. We have these tremendous landmarks. So what, for example, what if we came up with we could have a landmark day where, right, whether it's everybody grabs their phone and it's a QR code, or we even have some listening devices for the older folks. And, the stories that, we've all taken tours probably with, Ed Hands leading us around town. But to be able to have the opportunity to do that on a more regular basis, and partner up with, the Farmer's Daughter, a hugely successful business. We could have a landmark crawl. We could get, shovel town out there. I mean, there's lots of different ways to get different age groups involved. And when people, just a 2-mile walk or a 1-mile walk around downtown, it's amazing how many resources there are and how many stories there are. So I think, between, we have a very active historical society, we have a historical commission, which I think needs to become a little more active, and we have some great resources of folks in town who aren't getting any younger. So we need to get this information and get it presented so we can start to pass it on to the next generations, because there really are some fantastic, interesting stories out there, and people don't think about it, but people enjoy history. That's why, starting in 1975, right? Faneuil Hall was really the first major historical rehab in the nation. People maybe not get involved in it, they don't understand, but people love to save history. Well, we've spent a lot of money and saved a bunch of history. I think we just need to get active and start we can learn as we go, some low-cost ways to involve some of the local businesses, and reach out to these schools. I mean, there's no shortage of design universities in New England, and they all come to Easton. We might as well make some money from them while they're here.
I wonder if Stonehill would like to sponsor audio walking tour, and they would like to, donate. I know that they do donate every year, but I'm half joking there, actually, not completely joking. Dottie, you mentioned OCPC, but how soon could they help us? That's obviously we would need help, but to kind of Greg's point, I don't want to wait a year, and it might not be a year. I might be assuming there. So how long could they?
It would be months. It's not something that's going to be before June 30th. So it could start, probably this summer if the grant is awarded.
What could we do? What could we supply them between now and then, so when that day comes, they have a ton of information to work with and they're ready to do something?
It doesn't work that way. So they can't work on it until they get the funding.
But we could start working on it. We could start pulling this together. I mean, Mark, you and I are going to meet anyway. We could talk a little bit more about this, but I mean, just jotting down, once you start putting pen to paper on all the assets that are in the district, that alone is a big start. And then to start think about, Greg's idea, is there a way, are there people that are willing to kind of organize maybe these informal landmark days that start to build some buzz around the idea.
Okay.
The other thing to remember is the 350th anniversary of the town is coming up in 2025. So the select board will be appointing a committee to start heading that up. We've had a lot of interest. There has been some funding collected. I'm not sure how much that is, but that'll be something that will be on our plate for the select board this year to get that going.
Mark, is this something that we as a group can own? And I'm asking that question. I have so many different questions. I don't know the answers probably to any of them. But I know what you were saying, that there's a company out there that does these walking tours. And then Greg said something that I thought was very interesting about QR codes. And I know that we have our app, our Town of Easton app. And I started thinking, is there a way for us to, figure out what a walking path could be, and you know, you spray paint shovels because that's what the path is going to be, right? We're gonna put shovels spray painted on the sidewalks in whatever our path is, and when you reach a certain landmark, we're going to put up to start signs with QR codes. This is a stop, and you scan your QR code, and it's going to take you to our app where we house a little video or a little audio piece that you can listen to right on your phone. You don't have to get any sort of headset or anything, and it's going to tell you, this is the library, this is the amphitheater behind the library, this is the Governor Ames estate, here's the thing about the rockery and architecture, right? And you've got all these little spots around town that you could follow. I don't know how easy that is. I don't know how possible that is. Do we own, could we own that? Obviously we need help from Historical Society to figure out what to say and how to say and that, but is that something that we could own, or I don't know how that works?
Well, it's definitely born out of this Economic Development Council. That much I can say. I think we will own the responsibility of its creation. Yeah, I don't see anybody else doing this. It will also require funds to hire people, because the creation of this is not that easy. You know, the prices that I got back was, like I said, was $10,000 to $12,000, and that was for, I want to say, like nine stops. Was $10,000 to $12,000 for 9 stops, and it was, you know, full, everything included.
That's pretty good.
But it was for 9 stops, so we need money to make this, and we need to supply who we hire the information.
Right.
You know, the ball has to get rolling, and then, you know, we would have to establish a route, like you mentioned. But there's a lot of work, and I don't think anybody else is going to do it other than the Economic Development Council, and probably some added labor to from Stephanie and a lot of people. But, you know, who owns it? The town owns it. We just created it.
So, Mark, I do have a question on that. Especially good idea as well. If we do make this investment of $12,000 to do this audio tour, is there a way that they capture metrics, and also if we can put barcodes on the restaurants, et cetera, downtown, so folks can scan those? Because what that would do is we would know if the app is being used, or how many people are using it, and how is this tour actually impacting our business, right? Our industry, so that we can measure the return on investment if we're going to make that investment. So $12,000 could multiply to 100,000 as an example, et cetera. So is that, do they have that capability? Because other than that, we're really not going to know or understand if that $12,000 was a good investment.
So that's a great question, Chris. And, you know, my mind goes to, I can't imagine them not being able to see how many times a recording was listened to. That's like basic technology that you can just see how often that is used. But I've been thinking about this question a lot. Tourism. So when somebody comes in and they say, well, why are you even doing this? The answer is, well, and another question was, and also, how do you monetize? How do you actually, does the town receive money? Like, how does this happen? The whole point of tourism is to build up business, to make it more attractive to people. So it's by virtue of, you know, what tourism is, it's for the greater good of the community. It's not necessarily for us to capitalize on it, it's for everyone else to capitalize on it. And I think that's really important. What do you guys think about that? Like, if somebody said, why are you doing this? How would you respond? What is your justification?
I would say, oh, go ahead,
Go ahead, Dottie. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the first thing I hear when I think of tourism is meals tax and hotel tax, and, you know, the increase, obviously, to our businesses, but there is a benefit to the municipality as well.
And I don't know how measurable that benefit is, Chris, which was one of your questions. Like, how are you going to measure that? It's, well, I will look around and see.
to
for
Donna's
hotel,
point, if you're looking at meals
you know.
taxes and sales taxes and that type of thing, you can look at what your trends were prior years and then moving forward after a program was implemented to see if that needle moved.
And that would help. What that would do, Mark, and the basis of my question is, we're trying to bring new businesses and retain existing businesses within Easton. And if we can prove that our numbers are increasing due to this new activity we brought into the town, we can have them engage more because there's a return on investment, right? So when we ask them to come along and support us, we have numbers to prove that, right? Versus just some, it's no longer hearsay, right? It's not ambiguous. We actually have facts on facts, like Stephanie's saying. Some way we have to be able to show the businesses when we go to them and ask them to engage us. We need to show them where the benefit, how it will benefit.
Mm-hmm. Right. Dan, what were you?
Yeah, I feel like the consensus of the group is that we're definitely interested in this. Mark, you took the proactive approach to identify a company that does this. I think a logical next step is invite them to the next meeting. I don't think any of us are big on recreating the wheel. Let's get a sense of what best practices are. If we're talking about a $12,000 to $15,000 appropriation as a first step, let's start working on a financial strategy, how to get that appropriation approved either through the select board directly or through town meeting. And it seems like a pretty low-hanging fruit, and it doesn't seem like an incredibly high number or level of financial investment to get something moving. So if we work through that lens, let's have the meeting, have them talk about best practices, and have us make an informed decision as to whether or not we want to, take our first bite at the apple. I don't think we have to do everything at once. I agree with Greg. I'd love to jump in the deep end and get things moving. This seems like something that we can tangibly get moving and bring benefit to the district itself and maybe other places. But I think this is something that we should and could move fairly quickly on and not have to get through a too deep of an analysis, because that leads to paralysis. Right.
I think you set forward a path that is perfect, Dan. That makes absolute sense to me. It is low hanging fruit. It's $10,000 to $12,000. I think that's manageable to attain. And I have a company that's already quoted me, and if he could present in this meeting, at our next meeting, it will move things along. It'll. Yeah, that's
you
great.
budget, you procure it. If they're selected, great. If not, I'm sure there are other comparable companies that have the same abilities, but they'd be, leading in, introducing their company and their capabilities and informing us. So I think we should do that and either push it along or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
think
at some point, again, picking up on what Greg was talking about, and I don't mean this necessarily next meeting or the next meeting, but where it really makes sense is, maybe inviting some representatives from the Historical Commission, from the Historical Society to engage in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to your point, Stephanie, they could craft what it will look like if we have we know there's a benefit, there's an appropriation, there's something we can collaborate with coming out of that.
I think it would be, I don't want to be too blunt, but I think it would be disrespectful not to invite.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We couldn't do it without them.
Yeah, and that's
right.
being
It
proactive
would be beneficial.
It doesn't necessitate the fact
Yeah,
that we're
and it would be
collaborative
very
working together,
beneficial.
except
Yeah.
we're helping give them something, a tool to help us deliver a better product to the town and the region. So,
and in terms of funding, I think this is personally, I think this is perfect for CPA. I mean, there's a 10% earmark every year for historical. And I've been, more and more I've coined a phrase recently that CPA allows towns to be indulgent, on things that they, wouldn't have a means necessarily to fund. And it's just, it's just small potatoes when you look at what we take in a year. And it's
in a couple months, Old Colony Planning Council has an opportunity for us to collaborate. There's, potentially additional funding. Let's not be dependent if we don't have.
I think
the number is so high that we're.
Yeah, I think we can do this and we can make this happen and be a leader. So, all right, we have talked about that a lot. It's a really exciting thing to talk about, and I could talk about it for a lot longer, but we try and keep these meetings to an hour. So if it's all right with you guys, I think in the next meeting, I heard some items in there that we really need to explore. Funding, we're going to try and do this on our own. And I am going to invite Jim Koza of that organization, I think he's out of Chicago, into our next economic development meeting to present to us. And we're at the same time too, we're going to talk about, between now and our next meeting, how we can get funds. All right, so that's great. We got to keep going. The next item on the agenda is district updates, which Greg, if you could share with us, and when I say district updates, just for, not for you, but for the general public at home, I'm more referring to the economic zones, I'm referring to Five Corners, I'm referring to Queesit, and I'm referring to downtown, without violating anybody's privacy. What can you share with us on happenings in these zones that will contribute, that are contributing economically beneficially to the town?
Well, you didn't say I couldn't violate laws. No, I'm just teasing. So if you mind, I'm going to share my screen and oh, did that work?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to briefly say I'm going to take us through the Queesit Commercial District today. I'm going, and the reason being, the last few years we've done quite a bit of zoning and amendments of zoning in town. And anybody that listens to it that's not involved in it probably tunes it right out. It's not very exciting talk. So I thought one of the reasons I felt it was important to have a planning board rep on this committee was to try to tie things together. This committee seems to do a lot of work with marketing and reaching out to business leaders. And I think given the nature of the properties we have in town, it probably behooves us to be proactive in seeking out folks for projects. We don't have a highway, we don't have large parcels, so it's not like we're on the algorithms of the large firms kind of go right past Easton. So I wanted to quickly go through Queesit, and I just want to say I'm certainly not endorsing any project. I'm just simply showing some creative ways where maybe land could be consolidated, and I'll keep things as anonymous as possible, but we should be able to follow along. So just quickly, this is a snippet from our zoning map, and you can see Belmont Street, that's Route 123 coming out of Brockton. And running north to south here, north is top of my screen. North to south here is Washington Street, also known as Route 138. This hatched area is the Queesit Smart Growth Overlay District. Think of the apartments at Doug King and condos that Doug King has been building mixed use behind Stone Forge since 2008. So then the brightest red or pink, depending on your screen, up in here, this is the Queesit Commercial District. Basically runs from, think of where Honeydew Donuts is, all the way down to the car wash, where the Dean Mill used to be. And you can see there's Queesit A, B, and C, which just refer to different dimensional requirements, but I won't bore us with that today. So if we zoom in on I'm working on a three-dimensional model because I have no life and I actually want to do a CNC model of the Eastern neighborhoods through 200 years. So this is that same district with parcels put on it. So today, there's really 4 parcels in that district or in this area that I think can drive economic development, that can drive revitalization. Because you can see many of these lots, these used to be houses before this turned into the original highway to Providence, and before that was abandoned, by the interstate. So a lot of these small parcels, are going to be difficult to consolidate because they're not large to begin with, and many of them are on bodies of water, and there's a lot of restrictions there. But if we look at these 4, excuse me, let me zoom out one more time. Okay, so down here in the pink, this is 661 Washington Street, also known as Cariz Plaza, at the intersection of Depot and Washington. Up here, 620 Washington Street, which I've dubbed El Mariachi Plaza. Over here, Crowfoot Gear, which if you're familiar with Central Street, as you're driving to Route 138, this is the Sawtooth Masonry Factory, where there's a couple auto repair shops in there now. The building has seen better days. And then the Easton Marketplace, the large sort of octagonal building. And, you know, I say these four are the drivers of this district because they are the largest parcels, plain and simple. And we'd always thought, okay, once we get one of these to go, we think the district will, you know, it's copycat. And, you know, 123 coming out of Brockton is pretty much tapped out development wise. So we approved, we being planning board 3 years ago, I guess, we approved the first, under the new zoning, the first smart growth project here at Korea's Plaza. And hopefully, all right, I'll show you very quickly. Yeah, you remember, some of you were at the groundbreaking, but so here was the site plan for it. It was going to be 31 apartments of various sizes and about 70,000 square feet of commercial space. And then back here was a 3-story residential building. Now, like I said, that was approved. We even, post-approval, there were some issues on the development side. We tweaked to the zoning last year in an attempt to help that along. We're actually, Stephanie and I took part in a meeting yesterday regarding it, and you know, hopefully at some point, some version of this project will come back before us. So that, I won't talk too much about that. That's kind of their existing. The plaza is actually, there's 2 parcels of land here. So in front is the building that we're all familiar with, or if you go to that restaurant. In the back was where they had a really large septic system. That septic system was recently abandoned when they tied into the sewer district. So just for example, under the zoning that we have in place, this plaza has 1.3 acres, which allows them to, if they did a mixed use project, and by that means that's a mixture of residential units and commercial. Commercial could be office space, could be a restaurant, anything that's allowed under the use table. So for example, in a mixed use project, they could have 5 residential units and you know, upper story, and they could have, or they could do it as 2 separate buildings. They could have a commercial building, residential building out back if they wanted, or if they wanted to include an affordability component, which ties into our SHI, you know, our 10%, our 40B numbers in town. They could double that. They could do actually 11 units because they kick over the roundup number. So, and you can see there's quite a bit of real estate there that you get something new could be built out back, do it all as 1 unit, and then this could come down, or you know, you could put a building to the front and to the back. But certainly, there's potential there for a you know, for a nice project. And there's also a number of houses here that have a larger number of small apartments in those. Who knows, maybe those can be consolidated as well. Then I'll jump over Crowfoot Gear. So the dark green here represents the property of Crowfoot Gear, which, excuse me, currently is 3.7 acres. Whoops, sorry about that, zoomed out. Great potential here. You know, remember there's that stream that goes right under, and you know, someone, boy, if you could consolidate with all these properties out front, don't you see a wonderful? You could have a park, you know, some nice green space here under 138, open up into this, you know, a really handsomely restored building. And it's interesting, there is an abutting property which I show here in this hatch, which totals another 4 acres, which would give you a total of 7.7 acres. So again, going back to a mixed use, you can see looking at that building, this would be great to have a residential component and have an artist loft or have a business component. I mean, I know bricks and mortar are certainly have changed, but they're not going away, and we don't have much commercial space, so we need to hang on to what we have. You know, so in theory, if this parcel on its own, just in the dark green, you could do up to 28 units in a mix, you know, with commercial as well. Or if again you did affordability component, and you know you could do and you tied in this unit, you could get up to 56 units. So there's quite a bit of you know, from 12. I misspoke. I'm sorry. The dark green is 12 units or 24. Both together are 28 or 56. So there's, you know, there's some environmental issues there that need to be handled, and some other issues, but something's going to happen there someday. Better to be proactive. And now my favorite piece. So back in the days, I was actually involved in the construction of this. But so Easton Marketplace. The dark brown represents the footprint. You know, you think of it, so here's the marketplace. Then you have the old school, which is now a kitchen cabinet company, sales company. Then here's the old post office, which I believe is a dentist office. And here's a Wendy's. Not that I've ever been there or I'm familiar with that. And so back in the, so this is where the septic system was back in here. Now you see these green areas, that represents potential wetlands. But it was interesting, Stephanie actually educated me on this a few years back. I remember I did some work on this building, in the Willwork building in the industrial park. And this property behind it is like 6 or 7 feet higher. And when we were doing the work, we realized we had to go before the Conservation Commission because we were within the buffer zone. And I'm like, how can there be wetlands above us? It didn't make any sense. Well, this is the IBC conduit manufacturing firm. In this location, 150 years ago, there was some type of industrial use, and this was a man-made cooling pond. So, you know, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that these could be eliminated or maybe recreated somewhere else where they were man-made. So if that being the case, you know, Stephanie and I had conversations with some of the property owners a few years back here. Never really got anywhere because nothing can start until we get somewhere with this property. But if you look at IBC right now, they're accessed. If you've ever been caught behind the trucks when they're awkwardly trying to come in off of 123, hold on. I have a design plan here. Bear with me for a second. I always panic when I'm presenting my screen. Forgive me. Where is it? Right here. So, okay. So the thought was, and again, there's many ways this could be diced up, but just was Bill Nixon, the owner of this building, at the time he was saying he'd love to be able to add on. Then the gentleman who purchased the old school for his kitchen company, and his name escapes me, forgive me, he was looking to have a building out back related to McDonald, thank you. And then, so the thought was, well, what if IBC sold off some of their land here and here, which was represented on my previous plan, and because they wouldn't mind entering from the industrial park. So, and what if these two people gave up a little bit of land here so that you could enter in here to access IBC, and then back in here, maybe it's in addition to this, there's an additional lot, or maybe these are more businesses that would come off of 138. But the point is, we're able to create, you know, a new economic zone with what is now landlocked. And then over here on the some of the numbers for the 661 Washington, I'm sorry, for the 574 Washington Street, just the parcel itself, without being expanded, the existing, you could do up to 27 units, again, part of mixed use, 27 units or 54 if you did affordability. But under this footprint that I'm showing, if we tied all this land together, you could do up to 43 units and or 86 if there's an affordability component. And that really brings up possibility. These footprints right here that I threw on, now obviously this would be designed with much more detail, but this is mimicking the footprint of the last building that Doug King Builders did behind Stoneforge. I think it was a 60-unit apartment building, just for scale, to give us an idea. So I popped a couple of there. I said, but hey, you know, maybe there'd be some professors at Stonehill, or empty nesters that want to be close to the highway. Maybe there's some nice masonry, or whatever it does, some nice kind of townhouse units here. So there's just and then you could also have a walking path from the industrial park into this area, where conceivably there would be a restaurant or two. So huge potential here. Just needs, we need people that want to collaborate, and people that want to either expand their properties or sell their properties. But a hugely important piece really for this district. And I think once any of these see a substantial project go in, you'll now see there's certainly going to be demand. I mean, there's great potential right across from the pond. There's an empty lot, and there's kind of a dilapidated building. Huge potential to take what is a rather unsightly district, and I all due respect to the current property owners, but and turn it into a huge asset for Easton, especially given its proximity to the school. So Anyways, I kept it 11:56. You still have 4 minutes.
I do. Greg, that's a phenomenal synopsis of the Queeset District. I think all of what your all these ideas are phenomenal. And a couple things. We now have the infrastructure to support this. We have the zone specified. We have the economic drivers, the want from the town. There's one massive piece of the puzzle right now that we have before us, and we're working through. Every single property is privately owned. Every single property, you need the want, the cooperation, the desire to develop, the desire to sell to somebody who will develop. Those are the things. Those are the roadblocks that we have that we're having trouble getting through, and we're working on it. But if all of what you said could happen and we could just make it happen, I would be thoroughly in favor of it. But we need some cooperation, and these things take time. I think that sewer just went online in 2 years ago. When you're creating economic zones like this, it takes a decade to do. It doesn't happen overnight. But this is where it begins. So I think everything it looks outstanding. But it is 11:57. We do try to keep these under an hour. Does anybody have any quick comments they would like to make on Greg's very thorough presentation? No? All right. So the last item on the agenda is availability and use of properties within economic zones. Last time we talked about what is available in all of these zones and what is the use of those availabilities, for business. That was a question that the chamber had asked. That is something that's being worked on right now. And hopefully we'll have more of an answer. Maybe in our next meeting, we'll maybe at least have one zone where we can talk about what's available. Maybe the Queeset zone, actually. Maybe that's a good idea because there was just this thorough analysis that just occurred that we can, between now and then, maybe Stephanie and I can look at what actually is available in those zones and its potential uses. But yeah, so the last item on the agenda is general outreach and support. Stephanie, do you have any comments about general outreach and support?
I'm going to turn it over to Dottie because I think she has, I can't remember what I had sent out earlier in the month, but I think Dottie has sent some things through the Facebook page.
All yours, Dottie.
Yeah, there's some new grant funding through Mass Growth Capital, and it's for businesses primarily that didn't get the funding the last round. So we did have some, quite a few businesses in Easton get that, particularly restaurants. And so we've posted that on the Economic Development Facebook page. I've hand brought some information to some businesses, to try to bring their attention to it. I brought something to El Mariachi's, printed it out. There's definitely a language barrier in some of these cases, so I'm not sure that they were really able to understand what I was asking, what I was presenting to them. And I brought it to a couple of other small businesses that were really happy to get the information. So hopefully people will be able to get that. There's other business assistance. I sent the information to Matt, and hopefully we can get that on the website. On Old Colony Planning Council's website, in their economic development section, there's a number of lists. So I pretty much kind of copied and sent that to Matt. But there's Small Business Strong. They help small businesses. The Center for Women in Enterprise. There's a number of Harbor One has Harbor One University where you can take some online classes. And at the end, you can get up to $5,000 in loan funding. So, there's a number of assets like that are just ongoing. The big one is the Mass Growth Capital funding right now, and we're still waiting to look and see what the state's going to do for business support, what kind of monies will be coming from there, and as soon as those are available, we'll promote that as well. I think that might be it. for me.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments about general outreach and support? No? All right, that was a great meeting. It was really thorough, a lot of information, and I know it could go on for at least another hour, so I apologize if I was short or I segued very quickly. But that's how it goes when we're all trying to, make a living. So it is 12:01. If somebody would like to make a motion to adjourn, I'm all ears.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Full Janiti?
Second?
Strange. That was you, right, Greg?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor? Greg?
Aye.
Dottie?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Stephanie?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Aye. All right, meeting adjourned. We'll see you next month. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Aye.
Good day, all.
Everyone.